Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest aliens and UFOs video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's continue the wonderful book UFO Sightings. Once again going with chapter 11, the one that's titled UFO Healings, but this time it'll be part 2. This is again from the author Alan Baker. This part will actually wrap up the theme associated with this chapter, which is once again having to do with the opposite of a normal UFO or abduction experience. You know how there's always the notion that people are violently abducted and then placed through so much calamity. In this case, though, these are stories and encounters associated with alien beings that are helping people in a beneficial manner. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's start the next segment. It's titled A Selective Blessing, and this will wrap up actually everything associated with this chapter as well. So here's what it says. Virtually every aspect of the UFO phenomenon, from the flight characteristics of the objects to the conversations engaged in by human percipients and non-human entities, is characterized by absurdity. It must be understood that by absurdity, I do not mean to echo the skeptics who say that UFO encounters are not worthy of serious study, claiming that UFO witnesses tend to be stupid and frivolous dreamers who are prone to impose their own fantasies on sightings of mundane phenomenon. Rather, I use the word in the same sense as researchers such as Jacques Vallée, who point out that while genuine UFO-related events may resist our attempts to place them within a recognizable logistical frame of reference, they nevertheless occur and are experienced by perfectly intelligent and well-balanced people who are just as bemused and disturbed by them as the people who later read of their encounters in books and magazine articles. The apparent ability of these entities to cure some humans of a variety of ailments, from the superficial to the life-threatening, is another aspect of this essential absurdity. The obvious question to ask is, why are only some percipients healed? Why not all of them? Preston Dennett is an investigator from MUFON who has gathered more than 100 cases of UFO healings from the relevant literature and published them in a book entitled UFO Healings: True Accounts of People Healed by Extraterrestrials. In an article in the October 1996 issue of the MUFON UFO Journal, he illustrates the central question of this subject by quoting the three best-known abduction researchers, Bud Hopkins, David Jacobs, and John Mack. According to Hopkins, this is a sad and frustrating puzzle since he has a number of abductees who have serious medical problems who wish they were being healed but are not. Although the aliens seem to be interested in the most lovely aspects of being human, there's little evidence to suggest that they ultimately have our welfare at heart. As Hopkins reminds us, we wouldn't perhaps have AIDS and the hole in the ozone layer and everything else if they were here to help us. David Jacobs offers one possible answer, albeit one that does lift little on our spirits. He reports that the aliens will, on occasion, effect a cure of certain illnesses for the sole purpose of keeping the human specimens in good condition. In the words of one abductee, it's equipment maintenance. John Mack comments on the wide range of ailments that the aliens see fit to treat. Many abductees have experienced or witnessed healing conditions ranging from minor wounds to pneumonia, childhood leukemia, and even in one case reported to me firsthand, the overcoming of muscular atrophy in a leg related to poliomyelitis. According to Dan Wright, manager of the MUFON Abduction Transcription Project, preliminary statistical analysis reveals that 11% of UFO-related physiological effects involve such healings. An idea of the wide range of procedures conducted on abductees is given in Dennett's partial list of conditions that allegedly have been cured. They include the following: aneurysm, angioma, arthritis, asthma, back pain, burns, cancer, candidiasis, cold, diphtheria, fever, flesh wounds, heart condition, infertility, kidney disease, liver disease, multiple sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, myopia, paralysis, pneumonia, polio, rheumatism, tuberculosis, tumors, and warts. In order to illustrate the manner in which such ailments are apparently cured, I will describe some of the cases presented by Preston Dennett after his own survey of the UFO and abduction literature. Flesh wounds. On September 3rd, 1965, two police officers were on their way home after a high school football game. One of the men, Patrol Deputy Robert W. Good, had been bitten on the finger by a baby alligator and was experiencing considerable discomfort from the swollen wound. The other officer, Chief Deputy Billy McCoy, saw a formation of lights ascending from the right side of the road and pulled the car over. The two men watched as the lights approached the car and then projected a bright beam at them. Good's arm was at that moment hanging outside the car window, and his injured hand was bathed in that light, which felt hot. The two officers decided to leave the area as quickly as they could. A little later, Good noticed that there was no longer any pain in his finger. He later reported, "I suddenly realized it was not bothering me, and I pulled off the bandage. Hell, you couldn't tell I had ever even been bit." McCoy confirmed this. He said the swelling had disappeared and the finger looked a lot better. Color blindness. Alien entities frequently exhibit an interest in human eyes, possibly because of a profound difference in the structure of their own. Some percipients, notably Whitley Strieber, have commented on a strange structure that can sometimes be seen turning within the aliens' obsidian eyes. American researcher John Carpenter investigated the case of a 21-year-old man named Eddie, whose right eye was removed by aliens during a physical examination. After the beings had replaced the eye, he had the impression that they had fixed something in the course of the operation. Carpenter later obtained a statement from Eddie's doctor confirming that the young man had suffered from profound color blindness. After his encounter, his vision had improved up to green color blindness. Hepatitis. In November 1967, Danish UFO researcher Hans Lauritzen was contacted by a Swedish girl who informed him that he was on a list of humans due to be contacted by the space people. This prompted him to go on a series of sky watches with four of his friends in the hope that the girl might be right and they might encounter a UFO. A year earlier, Lauritzen had contracted liver hepatitis and had been forced to retire. This illness was, of course, not helped by sitting in damp fields waiting for the arrival of UFOs, and on the day of his encounter, his liver had become enlarged and he was tired and weak. On December 7th, he and his four friends spotted two dim yellow globes about 100 yards away. Lauritzen fell into a hypnotic trance and began to communicate with the entities inside the globes, who told him he had a great power to help humanity. This lasted for about an hour, after which Lauritzen returned to normal consciousness and ran back to his friends who were calling out to him. It was then that he realized he no longer felt tired. He later said, "I ran and ran so fast that my four friends could not follow me. I had to wait for them. I realized that I had been cured of my hepatitis." To confirm this, Lauritzen went to his doctor, who examined him and found that he had indeed somehow been cured of his illness. According to Lauritzen, "I passed the medical examination, not mentioning my contact, of course, and to the surprise of the doctors, 10 centimeters of my liver had disappeared so that it was now normal size. The blood test shows that it functioned now as any other healthy liver, whereas before I had a sick liver. At one time, it was as much as 16 centimeters too long. I am most thankful to the UFO for curing my otherwise chronic disease. I swear to God I have told the truth as far as I can see it." Diphtheria. Alice Haggerty was 6 years old when she contracted diphtheria in 1972. She had not been vaccinated against the disease because of her parents' religious convictions, nor would they allow her to be treated in spite of their doctor's protestations. Eventually, he informed them that their daughter had only a few hours left to live. On the night she was expected finally to succumb to her illness, she was taken aboard a UFO where she encountered angelic beings in white robes who passed a rod-like instrument over her body and then placed her inside a blue cylinder. The aliens then informed her that she had been cleansed and returned to her family. Cancer. Preston Dennett informs us of the following little known case. Lucia Davidson of Los Angeles was diagnosed with terminal cancer in 1989 and was given 3 months to live. She was also a repeat abductee, having had UFO experiences for many years. During the next abduction she experienced, the aliens told her that they knew of her condition and asked her to relax as they placed her on an operating table. An excruciating operation followed, and then she was returned to her home. Like Hans Lauritsen, she went back to her doctor, who examined her and discovered that the cancer had been completely eradicated. According to her medical records, to which she later gained access, this apparently miraculous cure had been verified by a major medical university. Interestingly enough, Lucia Davidson is also a victim of alleged UFO or U.S. government harassment, perhaps because of the cure she received at the hands of the aliens. Engomium, tumor caused by malformed blood vessels. Ted of Santa Clara, California, was diagnosed with engyomia at the age of 18 months. The tumor put pressure on his brain, and by the time he was 3 years old, he suffered from double vision and partial paralysis. His life expectancy was put at virtually zero by doctors. However, his condition began unaccountably to improve, and he was admitted to hospitals for exploratory surgery. The surgeons were astonished to discover that the anglomia had actually reduced in size, an unheard of occurrence. In adulthood, Ted decided to undergo hypnotic regression and recalled a UFO encounter in which beings put him on a table and focused intense, laser like lights on his head. The beings also opened his skull and examined his brain. He remembers that they touch all over and they find enlargement, and with the laser light, they're able to shrink it. The beam of light apparently incinerated the tumor. The vacuum like instrument was placed over his brain, and a fine substance similar to ash was removed. Another light beam was used to fuse his skull cap. This time, instead of cutting it, it mends. It mends the skull back together. The atoms go back together, and there's no scar tissue, and when it's finished, there's no indication that the skull had been opened. Such alien technological feats seem so incredible as to be surely the products of human imagination or delusion, in spite of the unexplained healings that accompany them. However, perhaps they are not as incredible as we might think, in view of our own recent advances in the field of so-called nanotechnology. We are even now reaching the stage where we can manipulate atoms to form new structures. Already we have electric motors that are dwarfed by a pinhead. The atoms in a piece of metal have been rearranged to form the letters IBM. Nerve cells have been grafted to computer chips, heralding the eventual union of human and machine. With these technological wonders in mind, surely it is at least feasible that a culture, perhaps millennia ahead of our own, would have mastered these techniques and could easily be capable of destroying a young boy's tumor and healing his skull atom by atom. Electrocution. A real estate broker named Katharina Wilson had a healing encounter in 1989, which she described in a book entitled The Alien Jigsaw, published in 1993. On August 7, 1989, she was injured by a nearby lightning strike. She decided to postpone seeking medical attention until the next morning, since her injury didn't seem to be particularly severe. That night, Katerina experienced an abduction in which she was placed on a table. There was an agonizing pain in her chest. She was surrounded by gray aliens who cut a hole into her chest and then inserted a black instrument. The aliens communicated with her telepathically, telling her, "We are repairing your heart. You will be okay now." Katerina awoke the following morning in good health, apart from residual chest pains. She was able to remember the abduction consciously and so searched for the expected scar on her chest. "I found nothing," she said. "No blood on my sheets and no scar. My chest was sore throughout the day, but it was not as sore as I would have expected it to feel after such a radical operation. I believe this machine they had over my head was realigning the electrochemical impulses in my heart because they had been altered by the lightning. Somehow I believe the aliens were repairing the damage the high voltage of the lightning had done to my heart." According to Katharina Wilson, the aliens have operated on her numerous times. It was shocking to remember the different times the alien had performed surgery on me. What could the aliens be doing to me that would require me having my surgery so often? It was not the first time I felt I may be a part of a huge experiment. The Common Cold. In his 1977 book, Situation Red, the late Leonard Stringfield recounts the case of Chuck Doyle of Florence, Kentucky, who was suffering from a bad cold when he went outside to check on his horse on the evening of May 10th, 1975. He was astonished to see a metallic object approximately 20 feet long and shaped like a manta ray hanging in the sky above his neighbor's garden. The object was projecting a thin beam of light on the ground. Doyle described it as similar to a laser, and that its width was constant all the way down. Suddenly, the beam came at me. When it hit me, it was like being hit by a bucket of ice water. I felt suddenly frozen and I couldn't move. This was quite literally so. Dale was frozen in a running position as he tried to escape from the object. While he was paralyzed, he received a series of strange mental images, including colors, mathematical symbols, and then scenes from another planet. The beam then released him and he fell to the ground. As with the objects encountered by Dr. X, the UFO then disappeared with a flash and a loud report. Well, after he returned to his house in shock, Doyle realized that he was no longer suffering from the cold. A few days later, he visited his doctor, who gave him a completely clean bill of health. Then that's it. That pretty much ends Chapter 11, UFO Healings, from the book UFO Sightings by Alan Baker. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. Lots of good encounters, right, associated with these type of healings, and it even goes into several of them as far as conditions separately. What was interesting, though, was the notion that these abductees and their healings, the question was brought up, why doesn't it happen for all the abductees? Why only a few of them, right? It does beg that good question. I mean, if aliens have that ability to heal people, and they have it apparently so easily, and they don't go by any basis associated with costs or expenses or anything else that usually plagues like the medical field now, anybody trying to find anything involving healings or something else, they have to have all that stuff and insurance in order to do so. The aliens don't seem to have that. They have the ability to just do it at a whim. So why isn't it done for the majority of those abductees? And another better question is, why isn't it done to humankind altogether? As the Bud Hopkins mentioned, we wouldn't perhaps have AIDS or the hole in the ozone layer if they were here to help us. That does bring up that good question there too. If they could have that ability, why not cure everything and truly make humans have the ability to be free of whatever else is plaguing them? Interesting stuff. But then there was all those other conditions involving separate encounters, like the flesh wound, those two police officers, one of them who had his hand out of the car. He had that cut from that alligator bite, and then that beam of light apparently fixed it. How about that? It fixed it on an instant. Color blindness, that was the other interesting one that stood out to me too. A guy who apparently was being investigated by aliens, or something else was happening to him during that abductee situation, and then his eyeball was popped out, and then when it was placed back in, he was free when it came to his color blindness. At least actually he was able to see green in this case. And then other ones that stood out associated with cancer. How about that? There was a lady who was diagnosed with terminal cancer, 3 months to live. And then this lady, Lucia Davidson, was abducted. She experienced an excruciating operation, but then when she came back to her home, she discovered that the cancer had been completely eradicated. What a weird turn of events. A blessing on that case, because all of a sudden it went from 90 days to basically being underground to now being cancer free, just like that. Interesting stuff. And then there was the other case involving electrocution that stood out as well. I talk about weird coincidences there. The odds of getting a lightning strike is one, but then the odds of also having an abduction, this happened to this lady. So in her case, she had heart problems after that electrocution. And now all of a sudden, the aliens were repairing things. They in fact told her, "We are repairing your heart, or you will be okay now." And then she basically after that operation, everything was okay with her. Her heart was fine and everything was good. So interesting stories. Let me know what you guys think. If you have any other encounters that stand out as far as other healings that you'd like to post in the comments below from these UFOs and then the aliens that are abducting people, then post them below. And let me know what your thoughts are too, as far as the idea is if they have these powers to do so, why don't they do it on the worldwide basis? It would almost seem like easy for them to do so, but what's holding them back? So, all right, everybody, thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.